1. A case file, which you can download from the website. 2. A pencil and an eraser. 3. 2 six-sided dice of different color. One will be the investigator and the other the mythos die. 4. Optional, a ballpoint pen or soft liner. 5. Optional, a third six-sided die to use as the constellation threat counter. 6. Optional, a separate printout of the D66 letter matrix. Grimlore Profane Truths is an episodical print-and-play word-finding and dice manipulation game with role-playing aspects. In every episode or case file, you try to fill several scenarios with letters to form dictionary words to progress in the story and to defeat your opponents. As you progress, the character that you represent gains more knowledge and equipment to help them in their case. A new case file will be released every week, featuring a new investigator as well as new opponents and items. Every case file also includes a hidden word. You can submit these words on our website. At the end of a series month, we will award a prize to the person who submitted the most correct secret words of the series. If there is more than one person, we'll draw from the pool of candidates. The prize will consist of a small voucher and the right to name one of the upcoming investigators, as well as their description and background if you wish so. This shows the 4 scenarios of the first case file. You start at 1 and work your way to the finale of the case in scenario 4. Other case files will have different layouts. Some of them include 1 large scenario and some could consist of up to 6 small scenarios. This shows the 3 opponents that can be encountered during the case file. They have a name, a statistics bar, and some of them also have an ability. The first column is the Mythos D activation trigger for the opponent. The second column is the amount of damage that the opponent deals. The third column is the amount of hit points of the opponent. The fourth column is the amount of experience points the investigator gains when defeating that enemy. This describes what happens when you cross out a box on the constellation tracker chart. This happens every time you cross one out. The effects will be different from file to file. Please refer to the icon reference at the back of the rule booklet to learn about the specific effects. In Clark's example, this means that he can adjust the result of his Mythos die by +1. This is the amount of damage a character can take before dying. The grayed out boxes can be unlocked by completing the first row of the XP chart. The amount of mental strain the character can take, also how well they can cope with the Mythos horrors. The grayed out boxes can be unlocked by completing the first row of the XP chart. These are the 7 attributes that are used in challenges. They are might, agility, perception, lore, social, and willpower. The Mythos attribute is locked until the first row of the constellation chart has been crossed out. This is the Mythos knowledge bar, where you can keep letters for later use. The second to last slot is unlocked when the first experience row is filled, and the second slot is unlocked when the second experience row is filled. Cross out 1 box per experience point that the investigator received. When you fill the first row, you unlock the first locked Mythos knowledge slot and the locked life force slots. When you fill the second row, you unlock the second Mythos knowledge slot and the locked sanity slots. Gears and artifacts can be gained by using experience points. Fill out the checkbox when you acquire one of these. The icons explain the effect of the equipment. Most artifacts also have several usage slots, which must be crossed out every time the item is used. Refer to the icon reference at the end of the rule booklet for a full explanation of the meaning of these symbols. Every time you roll doubles, you cross out a box and apply the constellation effect. See opponents in constellation above. When all boxes are crossed, the stars align just right, and the case has failed. The world has gone one more step further towards oblivion. Every case has its own story on the backside of the sheet. Start by reading the information about the investigator and the story background first. Then, when you start a scenario, read its corresponding block on the back of the sheet. When you have completed the whole case file, you can also read the epilogue block on the back of the sheet, if one is available. You can completely ignore this if you are not into the lore of the case file. But who knows? Maybe these little story bits might give you a hint or two on how to complete the investigation. Every time you start a scenario of the case file, you can read its lore text in the corresponding text block on the back side of the sheet. Pay close attention to the text. It might give valuable insight into the investigation. Some tiles in the scenario are locked until the character can complete a challenge. There is an overview of those challenges, including a short description in this block for easy reference. For more information, see the section on challenges below. This shows the D66 letter matrix that you use to determine your rolled letter in Phase 4. The first column is the investigator die value, the second column the mythos die value, and the third column shows the resulting letter. The fourth column displays the mythos value of the letter. The main objective is to complete the case. Each case consists of 2 to 6 scenarios. To complete a scenario, you must place letters from the start tile, door, to the target tile, elder sign, by forming dictionary words. In this image, the scenario has been completed, but nothing else has been gained. The scenario ends as soon as a letter is placed in an orthogonally adjacent tile. They are highlighted with a bluish tint. Keep in mind that you do not need to form correct words. You can just place a letter anywhere you validly can. But if no valid word is formed, you will not get experience points, nor any special tile effect. No other tiles can be filled once the connection between the start and end tiles has been established. You can move on to the next scenario. If at any time the life force, sanity, or constellation chart of the investigator is fully filled out, the investigator either dies, goes insane, or is subject to the horrors of the mythos respectively. Better luck next time. Some tiles in the scenario will pose a challenge to the investigator. The whole case usually includes up to 7 challenges, one for each attribute of the investigator. This is an example of a challenge tile. The background shows that we must complete an observation attribute test with a difficulty of 10, and the letter we must place there is a U. Challenge tiles can only be filled out if the challenge is completed. To place a letter in one of these challenge tiles, you must first have the letter. Then you roll 2d6, add your respective attribute value to the result of the roll, and compare it with the target number of the challenge. If the result is equal to or higher than the target number, you can place the letter there. If the result is lower than the target number, the investigator suffers 1 point of sanity loss, and the target number of the challenge rises by 2 for each subsequent attempt. The used letter is lost. Sometimes there will be a number instead of a letter in the upper right corner of the challenge. This means that the letter that needs to be placed there must be of that specific mythos value. Roll the D66, the investigator die is the 10 digit of the D66, and the mythos die is the 1 digit of the D66. So if I roll a 4 on the investigator die and a 3 on the mythos die, I have a D66 result of 43. If I roll a 2 on the investigator die and a 5 on the mythos die, I have a D66 result of 25. For every undefeated enemy in the current scenario, check their trigger value. If the mythos die is of equal to or higher value than the trigger value, the enemy will attack the investigator. Check their stats block at the bottom of the sheet for how much damage they inflict, and cross out that many boxes in the life force section of the investigator. Also pay attention to the special abilities of the medium and hard difficulty opponents when resolving this phase. If the life force section of the investigator is ever filled out, they have been killed by the eldritch horrors and must restart the riddle. If you rolled doubles, cross a box in the constellation chart and consult the block at the bottom of the sheet for this case file's constellation effect and resolve it immediately. The investigator cannot choose if there are 2 consequences. The second one only applies if the first one cannot be fulfilled. In case of the given image, the investigator must remove a letter from their mythos knowledge. If they cannot, because the bar is empty, they must lose a point of sanity. If the constellation chart is ever filled out, the case is failed, and the investigator must restart. Better luck next time. The constellation might also advance if you roll equal to or below the current constellation modifier in Phase 7. The player can now use the investigator's abilities and equipment to manipulate the D66 result if possible, and if they want to. No die can be manipulated before this phase, unless an ability or equipment description explicitly says so. By looking at the D66 letter matrix, the player can see which letters they will get depending on their D66 manipulations. Keep in mind that equipment, gear, and artifacts must be bought using experience points before they can be used. Take some time to check if you can manipulate your dice with the investigator's ability or by using the coins that you found during the current or previous scenarios. The player now has a new letter and can decide what to do with it with one of these options. 1. Replace the letter and use one from your stored Mythos knowledge slots. If you have previously stored a letter in a Mythos knowledge bar of the investigator, you can replace the current D66 result letter and place a stored letter in the riddle instead. The rolled letter will move into the Mythos knowledge slot that was just freed. The investigator loses 1 sanity point. If you choose this, you must place the recovered letter into the riddle in Phase 6 of this turn. Move to Phase 6. 2. Store the letter in a free Mythos knowledge slot. If you do not want to use the letter right away, you can put it into a Mythos knowledge slot. The slot must be empty. You cannot replace a letter in a Mythos knowledge slot without using the previously stored letter in the same turn. See previous option for that. The investigator loses 1 sanity point. Move to Phase 7. 3. Store the letter as a value of 1 the investigator's attributes. The player can choose to use the letter's Mythos value as one of their attributes. Look up the Mythos value of the letter in the D66 letter matrix and divide it by 2, rounding down, to get the attribute value. Yes, letter with a Mythos value of 1 cannot be placed into an attribute slot, as they would give 0 value. Note that number down in the corresponding attribute box of the investigator and raise the constellation counter by 1. The player can just overwrite an already assigned attribute, even if the new value is lower than the current value, but every time they do this, they will have to raise the constellation modifier by 1. Do not confuse this with the constellation chart. That would be fatal. Keep in mind that the investigator must unlock their Mythos attribute slot first, before they can assign a value there. Move to Phase 7. 4. Place the rolled letter into the riddle. The player can decide to just place the rolled letter into a valid tile of the current scenario. Move to Phase 6. If the player has not assigned the rolled letter to a free slot on the investigator's Mythos knowledge bar or one of the investigator's attribute slots, the letter must be placed into the current scenario. Letter can only be placed orthogonally unless one of the unlocked items of the investigator says otherwise, next to another letter that is already in the scenario. The exception is items that allow the investigator to place letters more than 1 space away or diagonally. In that case, the letter must be placed within the item's range to an already placed letter in the riddle. If there is no letter in the riddle at the start of the game, the player can place the first rolled letter into a tile orthogonally next to the start tile. 1. Rewards. If you have placed a letter in the current scenario this turn, check if you have completed any relevant words in the riddle. For every word that you formed this turn, you gain 1 XP. If you have completed an opponent word, the opponent has been defeated and can no longer trigger in Phase 2. The investigator gains an amount of experience points equal to the XP value of the opponent. If you have completed an upgrade word, check out their effect in the chapter below. Keep in mind that you still get the XP for the completed word in addition to the upgrade's effect. Also check the scenario for any other persistent effects that should be resolved at the end of a turn. Number 2. Resolve constellation counter. If you have not placed a letter in the current scenario this turn, the constellation modifier rises by 1. It starts at 0. Roll the Mythos die. If the result is equal to or lower than the constellation counter value, a constellation bar box must be filled and the constellation effect resolved. The constellation counter then resets to 0. If you roll higher, the constellation counter stays at its current value. Then start the next turn with Phase 1. An upgrade tile counts as completed if any of its arrows form a complete word. In case of some opponents, more than 1 arrow must form a complete word to defeat that opponent, according to their hit point value. If the opponent does not have the appropriate number of arrows, then only the existing arrows need to form words. Opponent tile. The investigator receives as many experience points as it says on the enemy's stat block. Also check the special ability of the enemy to see if there is an additional effect. First aid kit tile. The investigator recovers an amount of life force equal to the number of letters in the upgrade word. Coin stacks tile. The investigator can use this tile in this or any of the next scenarios of the case file to manipulate the investigator die result by +1 or -1 in Phase 4, dice manipulation. Cross out the tile to mark the coins as used. Book tile. Once the word for this tile has been formed, the investigator receives 1 additional experience point. Coin bag tile. The investigator can use this tile in this or any of the next scenarios of the case file to manipulate the investigator or mythos die result by +1 or -1 in Phase 4, dice manipulation. Cross out the tile to mark the bag as used. Key tile. The investigator can use this tile to place a letter into a locked tile in either the current or one of the next scenarios of the case file. Cross out the key tile to mark the key as used. Laudanum tile. The investigator recovers an amount of sanity equal to the number of letters in the upgrade word. Once a section of the riddle has been completed, the player can spend the accumulated experience points to acquire equipment and artifacts. The experience points cost for these are shown in the respective item's stat block. You can then start the next scenario in the case file. Sometimes a tile has a circle in it, with either a letter in the upper right corner or a number in the upper left corner. These are just hints as to what letter should be placed in the tile. Keep in mind that you do not have to follow these hints. Any valid word that you can form is fine. The hints will just point you to the correct secret letter in the current scenario of the case file. If you can fill out all scenarios as they were intended to be filled out, you will be able to gain the secret word of the case file and can submit it on our website to win a prize at the end of the current series, at the end of the current month. Again, it doesn't matter what letter you place in which tile, if you form valid words. You can completely ignore the hints and suggestions if you are not interested in participating in the monthly Secret Word Challenge.